Alright, here we go. So today I'm talking about Final Fantasy XII. Now here's the thing. Final Fantasy XII, before I can even start to talk about it at length, I have to make it clear. What I'm about to talk about is probably one of the most controversial things you can talk about when talking about Final Fantasy XII. On top of that, it's the number one thing that creates a big divide about people who've played Final Fantasy XII. It is, in fact, one of the most controversial things about Final Fantasy XII. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Ugh. Now, when it comes down to it, I want to talk about not just Final Fantasy XII, but also its re release counterpart, Zodiac Age. Here's the thing, I don't like Zodiac Age. I just don't like it. I don't like it, especially for what it does to the license board system. Now, here's the thing. People who played the game and stuck with it are going to feel me on this. They're going to agree a lot. People who played Final Fantasy XII and did not like the license board system are going to disagree with me tooth, nail, pitchfork, and axes. Oh, my lord. But I'm just going to say it because I feel like it kind of just needs to be said, not for the sake of proving somebody wrong or giving someone grief or trying to make someone redecide their opinion of the game. No. No, no, no. The real point of this is more like just to kind of vent what I've always thought. Now, here's the thing. I actually like Final Fantasy XII. The original one, not the re-release. I actually like the original one so much, I would rather play it a million times in a row as opposed to the Final Fantasy game that started me off, like Final Fantasy IX, instead of Final Fantasy 15, which was a colossal disappointment to me. I'd still rather play that more than even the worst Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy Type O. When it comes down to it, the underlying truth is I actually liked the original license board system setup the way it was. Now, some of you are going to be confused if you've played Zodiac Age. Some of you are going to think that but this new setup is so much better, King. It's so much better. I don't agree with you in the slightest. But the reason why I don't agree with you on this is for a simple reason. I actually learned the license board system. I actually managed to wrap my head around it. Just like the Gambit system, I managed to get my head around it. And on top of that, find something that works for me. I managed to get my head around it, and instead of having it become this huge, overwhelming beast I have to stare at, turn it into something actually manageable and even something that's both workable and abusable. I managed to, at times, break the game with setups. Oof. Boy, did I break that poor game. When it comes down to it, whether or not you dig the original license board system is largely due to whether or not you actually manage to get your head around it, whether you manage to make it work or not, whether or not you manage to grasp all the finite details or things you might be overlooking. It also helps to know exactly what place certain things are at so you can have a lot easier time of plotting out this is where I want this character to go, this is where this character goes, that's where that character goes. It becomes easier to work with and a lot more likable and manageable once you have your head wrapped around it. Now, yes, it does help to have a strategy guide. I managed to get one for really cheap when I was younger, when the game was just kind of a year or two out, so that helped a lot for me. But if you're someone who just takes notes aggressively and play the game over a few times, you're gonna have a grasp on it eventually, and as a result, you're gonna get it. It's gonna start to sink in how to make it work for you instead of against. The thing is, though, that takes time. People don't always want to put time in. So, the Zodiac Age's idea to combat this issue was to streamline the license board. Now, this is a very mixed issue. This thing actually causes a lot of controversy with this change because of how it's handled. Here's the thing, though. I both do and do not agree with this decision. For new players, streamlining the license board is a great idea. A really great idea. Here's the catch, though. It's only a great idea for new players. For vets, like me, it's a huge hindrance. It does nothing. It helps me not at all. It doesn't add any life to the game. It doesn't make me even want to play the game more. If anything, it does the opposite. It kind of makes me want to play the game less because I've already experienced the story. If I've already experienced the story, just a job system doesn't do anywhere near enough to justify 60, 50, or even 40 or $30. It literally doesn't do anywhere near enough. And in fact, it does so terrible at helping me, a vet, stick with the game again. Yeah, there's enhancements to its load times a little bit. There's some small, tiny, microscopic graphic enhancements. The problem is, though, is to most people, especially people who are like me, broke AF, these are not good enough things to justify $60. They're not enough to justify $30. It's barely enough to even justify $10. $15 is still too much. That's the problem here. As much as I do like and love the original Final Fantasy XII game, and am willing to play that game often, I'd rather not F with the Zodiac version. I don't even have the game. Let that sink. Despite my actual love for the original Final Fantasy XII game, I can't be bothered to go and purchase Final Fantasy XII Zodiac. That's how bad the game is for a veteran. For veterans, the real fun of 12, it isn't its storyline, it's not its characters, no. Those are cool things, but they're not what keeps you playing the game over and over and over and over again. No. That's not what's keeping the vets coming. That's not what has them going back and playing the game. What really got them to play the game was its license board, gambit system, and experimentation with how much you can or cannot break a game. Yeah. So basically, now having this whole thing where it's completely streamlined, pick a constellation. Ironically enough, my constellation is arguably probably the biggest joke of them all, which is hilarious to me. But, detail schmetails. Or, it's either the biggest or the second biggest. Oh yay, luck-based weapons. Oh joy. When it comes down to it, this game is just... Zodiac Age is just not what I was hoping for it to be. It's not what I wanted it to be, and it's not what I needed it to be. Now, if Zodiac Age had a way to turn off the streamline, to make it so that this way you can have the old license board system with all of the improvements that have been made to the game right now, but the problem is that that's not how things pan out. All it was a job system. And even then, that job system only hindered what is easily, to me, the best thing about Final Fantasy XII. Why do I want to go through and play the game when there's going to be a huge incentive to just play it the same way over and over and over again? Now, yes, there is other changes that have been made to this game that are good. Yes. Not enough, though. They're just not the kind of changes that are needed to make a broke vet go, sign me up. No. Not even close. It sucks to say that because, like I said, I do love the license support system. I have a pretty positive feeling about the Gambit system. Granted, it helps. I got my head around them. I eventually learned. And it helped that, like I said, even more so when I eventually got a strategy guide. That gave me a huge edge. The problem is, though, for vets, it's just not really worth it. Much less worth $60. I'm sorry, but no. No. I think that what they needed to do here for Zodiac Age is not just a job system. Not if they were trying to make it worth $60. Yeah, there's some balancing tweaks. There's some enhancements to what what you can do. Like, for example, instead of only being able to choose from this, or this, like 2 or 3 options at most for the starting of the game. Like, I think you only got to choose a sword or a dagger, and then you got to choose, like, shield. Then you got to choose which kind of basic, light, or heavy armor do you want to run with. And that's about it. You didn't get, from my knowledge, I don't think you got to choose magic armor. I don't think. But the thing is, though, well, yes, the merchants now are far more likable because you, instead of getting just one piece of gear and you have to work with it, instead now you're finding, okay, here's a pole, here's this weapon, this weapon, this weapon, that weapon, another weapon. It's far more fleshed out on what items you can purchase. Thank you. Like, I can't clarify just how much of a good decision that is. It makes it so that this way, starting the game off, choosing other weapons other than a knife or sword, makes it a far more pleasurable, far more worthwhile thing to do. The problem is, though, is I just don't like the idea of having to pick what am I willing to sacrifice? What playstyle am I willing to limit myself to? What combinations do I want to limit myself to? Because if I play as a, say, warrior-focused character using great swords, well, now I don't get magic of any kind. If I pick a gunner, guess what? My gunner can only use a specific type of magic, and that's it. He can only use a very specific magic, and that's all. That's the thing here, is that it's so streamlined to a point of where great builds that were capable of breaking the game for the better are limited or locked off entirely. And there's no way to turn them off, from my knowledge. I even looked. I hunted left and right in the option setting. I looked all over the game. I went above and beyond trying to find a way to turn it off. And I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, one way of being able to make it so you can merge two different styles would be through talking to the Moogle, who's involved with license board stuff. And it can help you reset and switch over to a different job. But the problem is, though, is that's not what happens. Instead, what happens is the entirety of the board that you just now spent your freaking hard-earned gil to start over with literally starts you over entirely. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to make it so you can go and make it so you're using heavy, giant great sword, a mixture of both heavy and magic armor while rocking spells. You can't do that. You can't do that. At all. And the thing is, to me, that really sucks and is really annoying and really stupid and makes no sense. Why the hell did you do this? Stupido. It's very, very frustrating because what was the best part about the game is pretty much gutted and then ruined. I kind of would have liked it if there was a way to turn that setting off. If there was like something in the options right when you start a new game where you can make it so you turn off the job system. I would have probably had a vastly better experience and a vastly improved opinion of the overall game then. Just by doing that alone would have actually improved any score I would have been willing to give it if I reviewed the game. Right now, if I gunned to my head, did a full-on review, it's going to score pretty low because of this change. Because this change alone is not enough to justify full price. Much less AAA price even. No. Not at all. It's just not anywhere near enough. And it sucks to say that. Thankfully, by some stretch of voodoo, black magic, I still have my old PS2. So I can thankfully run the original Final Fantasy XII. Thank you. To be honest with you, I hope this game really never gets picked up again, to be honest with you. I don't. Because in order for it to get picked up and for me to actually be happy about it, I would need it to be someone who actually gives a flying crap about the Final Fantasy XII license. That cares about the Final Fantasy XII game. I would want it to be in the hands of developers who are going to actually do a good job and make a good game. Then make profit. That's what I would need, and I definitely, beyond doubt, don't feel like this is something Square's capable of anymore. And it kind of depresses me a little bit, especially after playing like that of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which should have been a knockout for me. And yet, it's just kind of a disappointment because I know I'm going to be waiting about 30 some odd years before I ever get a complete Disc 1. Then I have to do another 30 some odd years to get a complete Disc 2. Great. I don't want Final Fantasy XII to wind up being like that. I don't want to be waiting multitudes, 8, more than likely 4 to 6 year gaps for each piece of a game. I don't want that. I don't like that. I'm not going to pay for that. This is Gamin King. I'm going to play another game. Any other game. See ya.